Captain Jake Morrison looked out from the bridge of the UES Defender. Below them, the planet New Haven colony spun slowly in space. The blue and green world looked peaceful. White clouds moved across the surface like soft cotton. Jake had been watching over this colony for 3 years now. Nothing bad had happened here in almost 20 years. Jake was 42 years old. He had short brown hair and calm blue eyes. He wore the dark blue uniform of the Terran Federation Navy, the bridge. Around him was quiet except for the soft hum of computers. His crew worked at their stations without worry. This was how things had been since the war ended. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez walked up to Jake. She was young, maybe 25, with black hair tied back in a neat bun. She carried a data pad in her hands. Her face looked worried. "Captain, we picked up some strange messages," Amy said. She handed him the data pad. "They're from the Krellian ships near the Outer Rim." Jake took the pad and read the messages. The Krellians were talking about expanding their territory. They used words like inferior species and rightful dominance. Jake frowned. These words sounded familiar. He had heard them before, during the last war. "How many ships?" Jake asked. "At least 50, sir, maybe more." "They've been gathering for weeks," Amy replied. Jake nodded slowly. The Krellians looked like large lizards that walked on 2 legs. They had sharp teeth and yellow eyes. During the last war, they had stayed neutral. But now they seemed to be getting bold. On the planet below, Dr. Lisa Grant sat in her laboratory. She was studying alien behavior patterns. Lisa was 38 years old with red hair and green eyes. She wore a white lab coat over simple clothes. Her computer screen showed data about different alien species. Lisa had noticed something troubling. Many alien races were acting the same way they did before the last war. They were testing boundaries, they were making threats, they were forgetting why the war had ended so quickly. She pulled up old files from 20 years ago. Back then, the Zephyrian Empire had attacked human colonies. They thought humans were weak. They thought Earth was just another planet with soft, easy prey. They had been very wrong. The war had lasted only 6 months. Human forces had moved through Zephyrian space like a storm. Every battle was won. Every enemy ship was destroyed or captured. The Zephyrians had surrendered completely. Other alien races had watched in fear and signed peace treaties immediately, but that was 20 years ago. Lisa's research showed that most alien species forgot traumatic events after 15 to 20 years. Their brains were different from human brains. They did not hold on to painful memories the same way. Lisa picked up her communication device. She needed to call Admiral Paul Henderson at Earth Command. Paul was an old friend. He would understand what this data meant. Admiral Paul Henderson sat in his office on Luna Station, orbiting Earth. He was 55 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought in the last war as a young captain. He remembered everything about it, the screams of dying aliens, the way enemy fleets had melted away before human weapons, the complete terror in alien eyes when they realized what they had awakened. Paul's communication device beeped. Lisa's face appeared on the screen. "Paul, we have a problem," Lisa said. "The aliens are forgetting, all of them." Paul leaned back in his chair. "I was afraid of this. We've been monitoring increased activity, too. The Krellians are massing ships. The hegemony of Solace is testing our border patrols. Even some of our former allies are asking strange questions about our military strength. It's like they think we've gone soft," Lisa said. 20 years of peace, and they believe we're not the same species that ended the last war." Paul looked out his window at Earth. The blue planet looked so peaceful. But Paul knew what lived on that world. Humans, the children of a death world. A species that had clawed its way to the top of their planet's food chain by being more dangerous than anything else that lived there. "Have you told Captain Morrison?" Paul asked. "Not yet. I wanted to check with you first." "Tell him." "Tell all the colony commanders. And Lisa, start preparing the old files. If this keeps up, the galaxy is going to need a reminder." On the Krellian homeworld of Krell Prime, War Commander Zektar spoke to the High Council. Zektar was large, even for a Krellian. His scales were dark green, and his yellow eyes glowed with ambition. He stood 8 feet tall and weighed as much as 3 humans. "Fellow warriors," Zektar said, his voice deep and harsh, "the time has come to claim our rightful place in the galaxy. The humans have grown weak with peace. They spend their time growing crops and building cities. They are no longer the monsters that destroyed the Zephyrians." The High Council listened carefully. These were old Krellians, some over 200 years old. But even they had trouble remembering the details of the human war. It seemed like ancient history now. "The humans got lucky once," continued Zektar. "They surprised the Zephyrians. But we are not the Zephyrians. We are stronger. We are smarter. We are the true masters of this galaxy." One of the old council members spoke up. "What about the peace treaties? The humans honored their agreements." "They have not bothered us." Zektar's eyes flashed with anger. "The treaties were signed by cowards. The humans are just another species. They have 2 arms, 2 legs, and soft skin. They cannot be as dangerous as the old stories claim." The council nodded slowly. The old stories did seem impossible now. How could such a small, weak-looking species be so dangerous? The humans they had met were polite and friendly. They traded fairly and kept their promises. They seemed almost civilized. Back on New Haven Colony, Jake Morrison called a meeting of his senior staff. The conference room was small but comfortable. Amy Rodriguez sat at the table with Chief Engineer Maria Santos and Communications Officer Ben Parker. Maria was 40 years old with brown hair and strong hands. She kept the Defender running perfectly. Ben was 35 with blonde hair and quick fingers. He monitored all the communication channels in their sector. "I've been talking with Admiral Henderson and Dr. Grant," Jake said. "We're seeing patterns that look familiar, too familiar." He activated the wall screen. It showed a map of their sector of space. Red dots marked where alien ships had been spotted. The dots formed a pattern around human colonies. "They're probing our defenses," Maria said, "just like before." "Before?" Ben asked. He was young and had not fought in the last war. 20 years ago, Jake explained. The Zephyrians did the same thing. They sent ships to test our response times. They watched how we defended our colonies. They thought they were being smart. Amy leaned forward. "What happened to them?" Jake's expression grew dark. "We taught them why you don't attack a Death World species. We taught them so well that they still have nightmares about us. Their children are raised on stories about the terrible humans who came from the dark between stars." Ben looked confused. "But we're not terrible. We're just people." Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "Yes, we're just people. People from a world where everything tried to kill us for millions of years. People who survived by being more dangerous than lions, sharks, and every other predator on our planet. People who learned to hunt in packs and never give up." He stood up and walked to the window. New Haven Colony spread out below them. Happy families lived there. Children played in parks. Farmers grew food in peaceful fields. "The aliens look at us and see civilization," Jake said. "They see art, music, and kindness. They forget that civilization is just a thin layer over what we really are. They forget that we chose to be peaceful. That peace is not the same as weakness." Maria nodded grimly. "Should we start preparing?" Jake turned back to his crew. "Send a message to Admiral Henderson. Tell him that the Krellians are massing ships in Sector 7. Tell him that other species are asking questions about our military readiness. Tell him that I think the galaxy is about to make the same mistake the Zephyrians made." Ben's fingers moved quickly over his console. "Message sent, sir." Jake looked out at the peaceful colony one more time. He hoped he was wrong. He hoped the aliens would remember the lessons of the last war. He hoped they would choose wisdom over ambition, but deep down, Jake knew better. The galaxy was about to remember why humans were left alone. The hard way. Commander Steve Parker stood on the bridge of the UES Defender 3, reading urgent messages from across human space. Steve was a tall man with dark skin and serious brown eyes. He had been a soldier for 15 years, but he had never seen reports like these. Captain, we have 12 separate incidents in the last week, said his communications officer. Lieutenant Carol Mills. Carol was young with short blonde hair and worried blue eyes. She had been monitoring alien communications all morning. Steve looked at the data on his screen. Krellian ships had been spotted near the mining colony of Rockport. They claimed to be conducting scientific research, but their ships carried weapons, not science equipment. Similar incidents had happened at Greenfield Station, Port Liberty, and New Dallas Colony. They're testing us, Steve said quietly. Just like the old files described? On the research vessel, UES scholar Dr. Kevin Walsh was studying historical records from the last war. Kevin was 43 years old with graying hair and thick glasses. He had spent his whole career studying how different species remembered traumatic events. Kevin's computer showed disturbing patterns. The Krellian Empire had official records of the human war, but they were stored in deep archives. Most young Krellians had never read them. The leaders who remembered the war were old and had retired from active duty. It's happening again, Kevin said to his research assistant. Dr. Nancy Cole. Nancy was 35 with red hair and green eyes. She specialized in alien psychology. The memory fade? Nancy asked. Exactly. Look at these patterns. Kevin pointed to his screen. Every major galactic civilization has the same problem. They remember big events for about 20 years, then the memories start to fade. The emotional impact disappears first, then the details, then even the basic facts get questioned. Nancy studied the data. So they remember that humans won the last war, but they don't remember why it was so terrifying? That's right. They know the Zephyrians surrendered, but they think it was just normal military defeat. They don't remember the sheer speed of it. They don't remember how completely human forces dominated every battle. They don't remember the fear. On the frontier world of Blackstone, Sheriff Tom Bradley was having his own problems. Tom was 50 years old with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been keeping peace on Blackstone for 12 years. The planet was rough and dangerous, home to miners and farmers who could take care of themselves, but lately strange ships had been appearing in the outer system. They stayed just outside the colony's sensor range, watching and waiting. Tom had seen this before during the war. Enemy scouts, gathering information for an attack, Tom walked into the local militia headquarters. The building was simple but strong, built from local stone and metal. Inside, he found Captain Roy Fisher and militia leader Nancy Cole. Roy commanded the patrol ship UES Ranger. Nancy led the local defense forces. How many ships this time? Tom asked. Roy looked up from his reports. Roy was 38 with brown hair and calm blue eyes. 6 Krellian vessels, 2 from the hegemony of Solace, and something we couldn't identify. They're getting bolder. Nancy stood up from her desk. She was 42 with black hair and strong hands. My people are getting nervous. The farmers are asking if they should move their families to the shelters. Tom sat down heavily. I fought in the last war. I know what this means. The aliens think we've gone soft. They think 20 years of peace has made us weak. Have we? Nancy asked quietly. Tom smiled grimly. Let me tell you about the Battle of Proxima Station. I was there as a young Marine. The Zephyrians came with 300 ships. They thought they would destroy our fleet and capture the station. We had 40 ships. Roy leaned forward. What happened? We destroyed all 300 enemy ships in 4 hours. Complete victory, 0 human losses. The Zephyrians were so shocked they couldn't even retreat properly. That's when the rest of the galaxy realized what humans really were. Nancy frowned. But how? We don't seem that different from other species. Tom's expression grew dark. Most species evolved on worlds, where cooperation was the key to survival. They learned to work together, to share resources, to avoid conflict. But Earth was different. Earth was a death world. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Blackstone's harsh landscape stretched to the horizon. The planet was dangerous, but it was nothing compared to Earth. On Earth, everything tried to kill us, Tom continued. Predators, diseases, weather, other humans. We survived by becoming the most dangerous thing on the planet. We learned to hunt in groups. We learned to never give up. We learned to win at any cost. Meanwhile, on the Krellian homeworld, War Commander Zektar was meeting with his fleet commanders. The meeting room was large and dark, built from black stone. 12 Krellian officers sat around a massive table. "Report," Zektar commanded. "Commander." Veltar spoke first. He was smaller than Zektar, with lighter green scales. "Our scouts have observed 17 human colonies. Their defenses are minimal. Most have only 1 or 2 patrol ships. Weapons?" asked Zektar. "Standard laser cannons and missile systems, nothing we haven't seen before. The humans seem to rely on their reputation rather than actual military strength." Another commander, Kekstar, added his report. "Human response times are slow. When our ships approach their colonies, it takes them several minutes to respond. Their patrol ships are cautious and avoid direct confrontation." Zektar's yellow eyes glowed with satisfaction. "Excellent. The humans have become weak. They hide behind their old victories like cowards." But one of the older commanders, Grigstar, looked uncomfortable. He was ancient, even for a Krellian, with dark scars across his scales. "War Commander, I have read the old records. The human victory was not normal. They destroyed entire fleets without losing a single ship." Zektar's head snapped toward the old warrior. "Impossible. No species is that powerful." "The records are clear," Grigstar insisted. "The humans struck with perfect coordination. Their weapons were more advanced than anything we had seen. Their tactics were flawless. The Zephyrians never had a chance." "Old stories," Zektar said dismissively. "Exaggerated by fear and time. The humans are just another species. They bleed, they die, they can be defeated." On the intelligence ship, UES Observer, Communications Officer Beth Murphy was listening to alien transmissions. Beth was 31 with brown hair and sharp green eyes. She specialized in breaking enemy codes and understanding alien languages. What she heard made her blood run cold. "Captain Martinez," she called to her commanding officer. "You need to hear this." Captain Elena Martinez walked over to Beth's station. Elena was 45 with black hair and dark eyes. She had been in intelligence for 20 years. Beth played the recording. Krellian voices spoke in their harsh language, but the translation was clear. They were planning attacks on human colonies. They talked about capturing human prisoners for study. They discussed the best ways to break human morale. "How many ships are they massing?" Elena asked. "At least 200, maybe more." "They're gathering forces from across their empire." "And, Captain, it's not just the Krellians." We're picking up similar chatter from the Hegemony of Solace, the Void Collective, and even some of our former allies. Elena's face went pale. "They're all testing us at the same time. They think we're weak. Should we warn the colonies?" Elena thought for a moment. "Send encrypted messages to all human military commanders. Tell them to begin quiet preparations. But don't panic the civilians yet. Maybe the aliens will remember their history lessons before it's too late." Back on New Haven Colony, Dr. Lisa Grant was working late in her laboratory. She had been analyzing psychological profiles of various alien species. The patterns were clear and frightening. Every major galactic civilization was showing signs of selective amnesia about human capabilities. They remembered that humans had won the last war, but they had forgotten the details. They had forgotten the speed, the efficiency, the complete dominance of human forces. Lisa's computer chimed with an incoming message. It was from Admiral Paul. "Henderson at Earth Command. Lisa, we're seeing coordinated probing actions across all human space. The Krellians are the most aggressive, but others are testing us too. How long do we have before they convince themselves to attack?" Lisa looked at her data. "Based on historical patterns, maybe 2 weeks. Once they convince themselves that we're weak, they'll move quickly. They'll want to strike before we can prepare." "And if they attack?" Lisa paused. She thought about the peaceful colonies, the happy families, the children who had never known war. Then she thought about what humans really were underneath their civilization. "Paul, you were there during the last war." You know what happens when someone threatens human civilians? The galaxy is about to remember why they left us alone for 20 years. Admiral Henderson's face was grim. I hoped we'd never have to teach that lesson again. So did I, Lisa replied. But some lessons have to be learned the hard way. The aliens are about to discover that human kindness is a choice, not a weakness. And when they threaten our families, we stop choosing to be kind. The communication ended, leaving Lisa alone in her laboratory. Outside her window, New Haven Colony slept peacefully under the stars. But somewhere in the darkness between worlds, alien fleets were gathering. The galaxy was about to remember why humans were the children of a death world. The attack on Copper Falls came at dawn. Colony Director Dan Williams was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. Don was 52 years old with gray hair and kind eyes. He had run the mining colony for 8 years without any major problems. "Sir, we have incoming ships," shouted Communications Officer Julie Thompson from the control center. Julie was 28 with brown hair and a steady voice, even under pressure. 15 Krellian warships, coming in fast. Don dropped his coffee cup and ran to the control room. Through the windows he could see the peaceful mining colony spread out below. 3,000 people lived here, families, children, workers who had never hurt anyone. "Send the evacuation signal," Dan ordered. "Get everyone to the shelters." But it was too late. The Krellian ships opened fire without warning. Energy beams sliced through the morning air, hitting the power station first. The lights went out across the colony. Then the ships targeted the communication tower. Cutting off all outside contact. Julie tried desperately to send a distress signal. Her fingers flew over the controls as explosions shook the building around them. "I can't get through. They're jamming everything." The Krellian attack was not random. They hit the medical center, the school, the residential areas. These were not military targets. These were places where families lived and worked. The aliens were sending a message written in fire and death. In the colony's main shelter, families huddled together in the dark. Children cried while their parents tried to stay calm. The shelter shook with each explosion above. Dust fell from the ceiling as the attacks continued. Mary Johnson held her 6-year-old daughter close. Mary was 34 with blonde hair and frightened blue eyes. Her husband worked in the mines and was not in the shelter. She did not know if he was alive or dead. "Mommy, why are the bad aliens hurting us?" her daughter asked. Mary did not have an answer. The colony had never threatened anyone. They just mined metal and sent it to other human worlds. They were peaceful people living quiet lives. Above them, the attack continued for 2 hours. When it finally stopped, half the colony was burning. The Krellian ships left as suddenly as they had arrived, leaving death and destruction behind. Don Williams emerged from the ruined control center. His face was cut and bleeding. The colony he had protected for 8 years was gone. Bodies lay in the streets. The hospital was destroyed. The school was a pile of rubble. "How many?" he asked Julie, who was treating a wounded miner. "We don't know yet," she replied, her voice hollow. "Maybe 500 dead, maybe more. They targeted the civilian areas on purpose." Meanwhile, similar attacks hit 3 other human colonies at the same time. Darwin Station lost its entire orbital platform. New Texas saw its farming settlements burned to ash. Green Valley's population centers were bombed into craters. Admiral Chris Johnson was in his office on the battleship UES Titan when the first reports arrived. Chris was 48 years old with short black hair and steel-gray eyes. He had fought in the last war as a young officer. He knew what this meant. "Sir, we're getting distress calls from 4 colonies," reported his aide, Lieutenant Mike Foster. Mike was 25 and had never seen real combat. His hands shook as he read the reports. Chris stood up slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes were cold as space. "Casualties?" "Estimated 2,000 dead, sir, all civilians." The aliens targeted non-military structures. Chris walked to his window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien commanders thought they had just won a victory. They thought they had shown humanity how weak they were. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. "Send a message to Admiral Henderson at Earth Command," Chris said quietly. "Tell him the Krellians have chosen war. Tell him they killed our children." "Sir, what should I put in the message about our response?" Chris turned back to his aide. The young man stepped back from the look in his admiral's eyes. "Tell him to activate the old protocols, all of them." On the fast attack ship UES Hornet, Captain Linda Barnes received the emergency call. Linda was 39 with red hair and green eyes that missed nothing. She had been patrolling near Copper Falls when the attack happened. "Take us in," she ordered her pilot, Lieutenant Frank Turner. Frank was 32 with steady hands and nerves of steel. The Hornet dropped out of hyperspace to find Copper Falls burning. Smoke rose from a dozen fires across the colony. The orbital platforms were twisted metal. Bodies floated in space where civilian ships had tried to escape. "Dear God," whispered Frank. Linda's jaw was tight with controlled rage. "Land us near the main shelter. We need to help the survivors." The Hornet touched down in the colony's central square. The area was covered with debris and blood. Linda and her crew got out to help, but what they found made them sick. The Krellians had used band weapons. Energy beams that burned through everything. Explosives that brought down whole buildings. They had violated every treaty, every law of war, every agreement made after the last conflict. Dr. Patricia Mills, the ship's medic, worked on the wounded survivors. Patricia was 41 with brown hair and gentle hands. But her face was hard with anger as she saw what the aliens had done. "Captain, these weapons are illegal," she said while treating a burned child. "The energy signatures match banned Krellian military equipment. This wasn't a raid, it was a massacre." Linda nodded grimly. She activated her communication system and sent a detailed report to Fleet Command. The report included images of the destroyed colony, readings from the illegal weapons, and testimony from survivors. At the same time, the galactic community's response was predictably weak. On the neutral station of Harmony Point, Ambassador Helen Clark tried to address the Galactic Council. Helen was 55 with gray hair and tired eyes. She had served as a diplomat for 30 years. "The Krellian Empire has committed acts of war against innocent civilians," Helen said to the assembled alien representatives. "They have used banned weapons and targeted non-military installations. This demands immediate action." The alien ambassadors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Solace representative, a tall blue-skinned being, spoke carefully. Perhaps this was a misunderstanding. "The Krellians claimed the human colonies were hiding military installations." "There were no military installations," Helen replied angrily. "They attacked schools and hospitals. They killed children." The Void Collective's ambassador, a creature made of living shadow, whispered in its strange voice. "The Galactic Council calls for measured responses. Perhaps economic sanctions would be appropriate." Helen stared at the assembled aliens in disbelief. "Economic sanctions? They murdered 2,000 civilians and you want to impose trade restrictions?" But the other species were afraid. They remembered just enough about the last war to fear human retaliation, but not enough to understand why it had been necessary. They wanted to find a middle ground that did not exist. The Krellian ambassador, War Commander Tekvar, sat silently through the debate. He was large even for his species, with dark green scales and cold yellow eyes. He showed no regret for the attacks, no sorrow for the dead humans. When Helen finished her speech, Tekvar stood up. "The Krellian Empire acted in self-defense. The human colonies were expanding too close to our territory. We gave them a warning they chose to ignore." "You gave no warning," Helen snapped. "You attacked without provocation." "The warning was clear to those who understand strength," Tekvar replied. "Humans have forgotten their place in the galaxy," we reminded them. The other ambassadors looked back and forth between Helen and Tekvar. They were trying to find a compromise, a way to avoid taking sides. They did not want to anger the humans, but they also did not want to challenge the Krellians. This was exactly what had happened 20 years ago. The galactic community had stood by while innocent humans died. They had called for diplomatic solutions while women and children burned. They had learned nothing back on Earth. President Matthew Stone was meeting with his military advisors in the secure conference room beneath the Capitol building. Matthew was 57 with silver hair and hard blue eyes. He had been a soldier before becoming a politician. "Mr. President, the attacks were coordinated," reported General Alex Cruz. Alex was 53 with gray hair and scars from the last war. 4 colonies hit simultaneously. Over 2,000 civilian casualties. The aliens used illegal weapons and targeted non-combatants. Matthew looked around the table at his advisors. These were people who remembered the last war. They knew what human restraint looked like, and they knew what happened when that restraint was removed. "What does the Galactic Council propose?" Matthew asked. "Economic sanctions," replied Secretary of State Karen White. Karen was 49, with black hair and frustrated brown eyes. "They want us to file a formal complaint and wait for a committee to investigate." Matthew was quiet for a long moment. Outside the conference room, Earth continued its peaceful rotation. Billions of humans went about their daily lives, unaware that their species was about to remind the galaxy of certain fundamental truths. "Gentlemen, ladies," Matthew said finally, 20 years ago we hoped we would never have to teach this lesson again. We hoped the galaxy would remember why we chose peace over conquest. But they have forgotten, and innocent people have paid the price for their ignorance." He stood up and walked. President Matthew Stone stood before the cameras in the White House press room. His speech would be broadcast across human space and to every alien government in the galaxy. Matthew wore a simple black suit and his face was calm, but his eyes held a coldness that made seasoned reporters step back. "My fellow humans," he began, his voice steady and clear. 3 days ago, the Krellian Empire attacked 4 of our peaceful colonies. They murdered over 2,000 innocent civilians. They targeted schools, hospitals, and homes. They used illegal weapons banned by every galactic treaty. The president paused, letting his words sink in. Around the galaxy, alien leaders watched the broadcast with growing unease. Something in the human leader's tone reminded them of old stories their grandparents had whispered. "For 20 years we have chosen peace," Matthew continued. "We have honored our treaties. We have traded fairly with all species. We have shown mercy to those who once fought against us. We hoped the galaxy had learned the lessons of the last war." His voice grew harder. "We were wrong. The galaxy has forgotten why we chose restraint. They have mistaken our kindness for weakness. They have forgotten what we truly are beneath our civilization." On the Krellian homeworld, War Commander Zektar watched the broadcast with his officers. They laughed at the human president's calm demeanor. To them, he looked weak and defeated. "Look at him," Zektar sneered. "He speaks of peace even after we destroyed his colonies. The humans are truly pathetic." But old Commander Grickstar did not laugh. He remembered fragments of stories from the last war. Something about the way the humans spoke reminded him of those dark tales. The calmness was not weakness. It was the stillness before a storm. "The Krellian Empire wanted to remind us of our place in the galaxy," President Stone said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Instead, they have reminded us what we are. We are the children of Earth. We are the species that survived on a death world by becoming its apex predator." The cameras captured every word as Matthew Stone delivered humanity's response. "The galaxy will remember why we were left alone for 20 years. They will learn, once again, that human restraint is a choice. And when you threaten our families, we choose differently." The broadcast ended, but the message was clear. Across human space, military bases that had been quiet for decades suddenly came alive with activity. Admiral Susan Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UES Nemesis, flagship of the home fleet. Susan was 46 with short gray hair and ice blue eyes. She had been preparing for this moment since the first reports of Krellian harassment came in. "Admiral, all ships report ready," said her aide. "Commander Bill Chun." Bill was 38 with steady hands and absolute loyalty to his commander. Susan looked out at the assembled fleet. 50 warships hung in space around Earth, their hulls dark and menacing. These were not the patrol ships the aliens had been watching. These were the vessels humanity kept hidden, the weapons of a species that had conquered its own death world. Signal the fleet, Susan ordered. Begin Phase 1. Across human space, similar scenes played out. Ships emerged from hidden bases in asteroid fields and behind dead moons. Weapon systems that had been disguised as mining equipment powered up. Space stations revealed their true military nature. On Luna Base, General Alex Cruz coordinated the largest military mobilization in human history. The command center buzzed with activity as officers who had been living quiet peacetime lives returned to their true purpose. "Sir, all reserve units are reporting in," said Colonel Janet Rivers. Janet was 42 with brown hair and determined green eyes. "We have 2 million ground troops ready for deployment." Alex nodded grimly. "What about the special units?" "The ghost battalions are already moving. The Void Walkers have been inserted into enemy space. The Death's Head Regiment is standing by for orbital assault." These were names that most humans had forgotten. Elite military units trained for one purpose: to wage war so efficiently that enemies would surrender rather than face complete destruction. Captain Joe Harper commanded the battlecruiser U's Vengeance, leading the first wave of humanity's response. Joe was 41 with black hair and brown eyes that had seen too much combat. His ship was one of the new designs, built with technology developed in secret during the years of peace. "Captain, we're approaching the Krellian border," reported his navigation officer, Lieutenant Sam Torres. Sam was 29 and excited to finally see action. Joe's crew was different from the peaceful patrol ships the aliens had been observing. These were soldiers trained in the art of war. They knew exactly what they were capable of, and they took no pleasure in it. "Open a channel to the Krellian fleet," Joe ordered. On his main screen appeared the image of Krellian fleet commander. Roll talk. The alien was large and confident, surrounded by his bridge crew on their command ship. Behind him, 200 Krellian warships waited in battle formation. "Human vessel," Rolutak said in his harsh voice, "you are entering Krellian space without permission. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Joe's expression never changed. "Fleet Commander Rolutak, I am Captain Joe Harper of the Terran Federation Navy. You are ordered to surrender your fleet immediately." The Krellian commander's yellow eyes widened in disbelief. Then he began to laugh. His officers joined in, creating a chorus of harsh alien voices. "Surrender?" Rolutak gasped between laughs. "You have one ship. We have 200. You humans truly are insane." Joe waited until the laughter stopped. Then he spoke again, his voice completely calm. "Fleet Commander, you have attacked our civilians. You have murdered our children. We are here to remind you why that was a mistake. And how do you plan to do that with one ship?" Rolutak sneered. Joe smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Who said we only brought one ship?" The space around the Krellian fleet suddenly filled with human vessels. They appeared without warning, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. The Krellians had been so focused on Joe's ship that they had not noticed the trap being set around them. 100 human warships surrounded the Krellian fleet. The aliens found themselves outnumbered and outpositioned, caught in the center of a perfectly coordinated military operation. On the intelligence ship UES Observer, Dr. Patricia Mills monitored alien communications across the galaxy. What she heard made her realize how completely the other species had misunderstood humanity. "Captain Martinez, you need to hear this." Patricia called to her commander. Elena Martinez listened to the alien transmissions with growing amazement. The Salas hegemony was recalling its ships from human space. The Void Collective was sending diplomatic messages expressing their deep regret over recent misunderstandings. Former human allies were desperately trying to contact Earth to reaffirm their friendships. "They're panicking," Elena observed. "Just seeing our fleet mobilize has reminded them what we're capable of." "But not the Krellians," Patricia noted. "They still think they can win," Elena smiled grimly. "They're about to learn otherwise." Back in Krellian space, Fleet Commander Rolutak found himself in an impossible situation. His 200 ships were surrounded by 100 human vessels, but something was wrong. The human ships were smaller than his, with fewer visible weapons. Yet his tactical officers were reporting energy readings that made no sense. "Sir, the human vessels are showing massive power signatures," reported his weapons officer, Sub-Commander Kexmal. "Their energy output is 10 times higher than our estimates." "Impossible," Raltok snapped. "Our intelligence reports show human. Technology is inferior to ours." "Sir, I'm reading the same data. These are not the ships our scouts observed. These are military vessels using advanced technology we haven't seen before." Raltok's confidence began to waver. Something was very wrong with this situation. The humans seemed completely unconcerned about being outnumbered 2-1. "Captain." Joe Harper's voice came over the communication channel again. "Fleet Commander, this is your final warning. Surrender your fleet or face the consequences." "Never," Raltok snarled. "All ships prepare to attack." "Show these humans what Krellian warriors can do." "As you wish," Joe replied calmly. "All ships. Execute Pattern 7. What happened next would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. The human ships moved with perfect coordination like parts of a single organism. Their weapons fired in synchronized waves, each shot precisely calculated for maximum effect. The Krellian ships began exploding before they could return fire. Their shields, which should have protected them, collapsed instantly under the human assault. Their hulls, built to withstand conventional weapons, were torn apart like paper dot in 15 minutes. 200 Krellian warships were reduced to debris and escape pods. The human fleet suffered no damage, no casualties, no losses of any kind. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Sub-Commander Kexmal, floating in an escape pod among the wreckage of his fleet, stared in shock at the undamaged human ships. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible?" Through his pod's communication system, he heard Captain Harper's voice broadcasting on all frequencies. The message was simple and would be repeated across the galaxy. "This is what happens when you attack human civilians. This is why we were left alone. This is why you should have remembered." On the Krellian homeworld, War Commander Zektar watched in horror as reports came. The Krellian surrender came faster than anyone expected. War Commander Zektar stood in his command center on the homeworld, watching human ships fill the space around his planet. 72 hours had passed since the humans had destroyed his border fleet. Now their invasion force hung in orbit like metal predators circling wounded prey. Zektar's hands shook as he activated the communication system. His yellow eyes, once bright with ambition, now showed only fear and defeat. Around him, his officers stared at the screens in stunned silence. The mighty Krellian Empire had been brought to its knees in 3 days. "Human fleet," Zektar said, his voice breaking. "This is War Commander Zektar of the Krellian High Command. We surrender unconditionally. Please spare our people." Captain Tony Garcia received the surrender aboard his flagship, the UES Retribution. Tony was 43 with brown hair and steady brown eyes. He had fought in the last war as a young lieutenant. He knew exactly what this moment meant for the galaxy. "War Commander Zektar," Tony replied calmly, "by the authority of the Terran Federation, I accept your surrender. You will order all Krellian military forces to stand down immediately. Any resistance will be met with complete destruction." "Understood," Zektar whispered. "All Krellian forces, this is your war commander. Cease all military operations. Surrender to human forces immediately. The war is over." Across Krellian space, alien commanders who had been confident just days before now threw down their weapons and begged for mercy. The speed of their defeat had shocked them into complete submission. They had attacked what they thought was a weak prey species. Instead, they had awakened the most dangerous predators in the galaxy on the planet's surface. Ordinary Krellian citizens watched the human ships with terror. These were beings who had been told that humans were soft and weak. Now they saw the truth floating above their heads in ships of war that could destroy their entire world with ease. Elder Throktal, one of the oldest Krellians alive, stood at his window watching the human fleet. He was over 300 years old, ancient even by Krellian standards. He remembered the stories his grandfather had told him about the last human war. "I tried to warn them," he whispered to his family. "I told them the old stories. I told them what the humans really were, but they would not listen." His grandson, young Velkrin, looked up at him with confused yellow eyes. "Grandfather, what are humans really?" The old Krellian's voice was heavy with ancient knowledge. "They are the children of a death world, little one. A planet where everything tried to kill them for millions of years. They survived by becoming more dangerous than anything else that lived there. We forgot this truth, and now we must pay the price." Ambassador Rachel Moore stood before the reconvened Galactic Council on Harmony Station. Rachel was 47 with gray hair and tired blue eyes. She had been appointed to replace Ambassador Clark after the attacks began. Her job was to explain humanity's actions to the assembled alien representatives. The council chamber was almost empty. Many species had recalled their ambassadors rather than face human displeasure. Those who remained sat in uncomfortable silence, afraid to meet Rachel's gaze. "Fellow delegates," Rachel began, her voice carrying the same calm authority that President Stone had used in his broadcast. "The Krellian Empire has surrendered unconditionally. Their military forces have been neutralized. Their government has been dissolved. Their homeworld is under human occupation. The few remaining alien ambassadors shifted nervously in their seats. The Salas representative, Ambassador Velquan, raised a trembling blue hand. "Ambassador Moore," he said carefully, "what are humanity's intentions regarding the Krellian people?" Rachel's expression softened slightly. "The Krellian people will not be harmed. We are not monsters, despite what some of you may think. But their government, their military, and their ability to wage war have been permanently removed. The Void Collective's representative, a creature of living shadow called Whisper, spoke in its strange voice. And what of the rest of us? What does humanity expect from the galactic community?" Rachel looked around the nearly empty chamber. "The same thing we have always wanted: peace, trade, cooperation. But this time, the peace will be enforced by those with the will and ability to maintain it." She paused, letting her words sink in. 20 years ago, my predecessor delivered a similar message to this council. The galaxy was warned that humanity preferred peace but would not allow itself to be victimized. That warning was ignored, and innocent people died because of that ignorance. The alien representatives hung their heads in shame. They remembered. Now they remembered the fear their parents had felt. They remembered why their species had been so eager to sign peace treaties with humanity. "This time," Rachel continued, "the warning will be permanent. Every species in this galaxy will remember what happens when you threaten human civilians. The lesson will be taught to your children, and their children, and their children's children." On the research vessel UES Observer, Dr. Kevin Walsh was documenting everything for his historical records. Kevin had been studying galactic memory patterns for years, and now he was witnessing the creation of a new historical epoch. "This is different from last time," he told his assistant, Dr. Nancy Cole. The response was too complete, too overwhelming. "The aliens won't forget this for centuries." Nancy looked at the data streaming across their screens. Every major civilization in the galaxy was broadcasting messages of friendship and cooperation to human worlds. Trade agreements were being renewed. Old disputes were being settled in humanity's favor. "They're terrified," Nancy observed. "Not just of our military, but of what we represent. We're the species that survived on a death world and then chose to be peaceful. Now they know that our peace was a gift, not a weakness." Dr. Patricia Mills, monitoring alien communications from her station, was amazed by what she heard. Species that had been neutral or even hostile just days before were now competing to offer humanity favorable trade deals and military cooperation. "The psychological impact is incredible," she reported to Captain Martinez. "They're not just surrendering militarily. They're acknowledging human dominance across all aspects of galactic civilization. On Earth, President Matthew Stone met with his advisors in the same secure conference room where the war had been planned. The conflict that everyone had feared would devastate the galaxy had lasted exactly 72 hours from first shot to final surrender? Casualties? The president asked. General Alex Cruz smiled grimly. 17 wounded, all minor injuries. 0 dead, complete victory across all theaters of operation. Secretary of State Karen White added her report. Every major galactic power has formally apologized for the Krellian attacks and requested renewal of their treaties with us. Some are offering us territorial concessions and trade advantages we never asked for. President Stone nodded slowly. And the Krellians? Their military is disbanded. Their government is dissolved. Their homeworld is under military occupation. War Commander Zektar and his senior officers are in custody awaiting trial for war crimes, General Cruz reported. What about their people? Fed, housed, and protected. Medical teams are providing care. Engineering corps are rebuilding the infrastructure damaged in the occupation. We're treating them better than their own government ever did. The president stood and walked to the window. Earth looked peaceful in the afternoon sun, but he knew the galaxy would never see his species the same way again. Gentlemen, ladies, he said finally, 20 years ago we hoped the galaxy would remember the lessons of war and choose peace. They forgot, and innocent people died. This time we will ensure the lesson is permanent. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, watching New Haven Colony rotate peacefully below. The colony had been reinforced during the war, but the fighting had never reached this far into human space. The Krellian surrender had come too quickly. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez approached with the final reports. Sir, all human colonies report secure. The memorial services for the attack victims will be held next week. The galaxy-wide peace treaty is being drafted. Jake nodded but said nothing. He was thinking about the families who had died at Copper Falls, Darwin Station, New Texas, and Green Valley. Their deaths had reminded the galaxy of a simple truth. Humanity's restraint was a choice, not a necessity. What now, sir? Amy asked Jake. Looked out at the peaceful stars. Somewhere out there, alien children were being taught new lessons about the species from the death world called Earth. They would learn that humans preferred peace but would never again allow themselves to be victimized. Now we go back to being peaceful, Jake said quietly. We trade, we explore, we build, we grow. But the galaxy will remember this war for centuries. They will remember that human kindness is a gift, not a weakness. Amy nodded, understanding. And if they forget again? Jake's expression grew hard for a moment, then softened. They won't forget, not this time, we made sure of that. The new peace treaty was signed 1 month later. Every major galactic civilization attended the ceremony. The treaty included provisions that the previous accord had lacked. Historical, education requirements, regular reminders about the consequences of attacking civilians, permanent monitoring of military buildups. Most importantly, the treaty established humanity,